All right, good afternoon, everyone. We're going to begin today's policy session of the Phoenix City Council for Tuesday, June 13th, 2017. A quorum of our council is present. I'm going to request that we do not have council information request items, at least at the beginning of the meeting. We can do it at the end of the meeting if people want, because we have important guests who are here, and I want to get to the business of the city as quickly as possible. Vice Mayor, is there a call for an executive session?
Call to order.
Call to order, and then we've called the meeting to order. And how about executive session?
Yes. I don't have my notes in front of me. That's what's going on. Mayor, in accordance with a properly posted notice and agenda, I move that the City Council, pursuant to Arizona Revised Statutes, Section 38-431.02.a, meet in executive session on Tuesday, June 27, 2017, at 1 p.m. in the East Conference Room, 12th floor of the Phoenix City Hall, 200 West Washington Street, Phoenix, Arizona.
There's a motion. There is a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, that passes unanimously. We're going to bypass report and budget updates by the city manager so we can right to the business of the city. Item number 1 on today's agenda is the proposed Colorado River Drought Contingency Plan multi-party agreement to fund the Gila River Indian Community's proposal for Colorado River system conservation. Obviously, we have many people here to present on this item. This item is an action item by the City Council here today. So I politely request from members of the council that that we allow the presentation, and then we'll turn to members of the City Council.
City Clerk.
We need to call the roll first. Okay, so first City Clerk will call the roll, and then I just have a short opening comment, please.
Councilman DeCiccio. Here. Councilwoman Gallego.
Here.
Councilman Nowakowski.
Here.
Councilwoman Stark.
Here.
Councilman Valenzuela.
Here.
Councilman Waring.
Here.
Councilwoman Williams.
Here.
Vice Mayor Pastor.
Here.
Mayor Stanton. Mayor, I also need to read the 24-hour paragraph.
Here, please.
The title of ordinance number S43641 on the agenda was available to the public at least 24 hours prior to this council meeting and therefore may be read by title or agenda item only.
All right, thank you very much. So now we'll officially move on to item number 2, the item concerning the Colorado River Drought Contingency Plan, an important multi-party plan that will be described here today. But let me just open it up by saying that I want to say thank you for our special guests that are here with us today. Our friend, Governor Stephen Rowe Lewis of the Gila River Indian Community. Thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to be here. Director Tom Bushosky from the Arizona Department of Water Resources, a recovering City of Phoenix employee, I might add, from the good old days. Leslie Myers, Phoenix Area Manager for the United States Bureau of Reclamation. Thank you also for being here. And of course, our incredible city staff who have done a great job working on behalf of the City of Phoenix to make today possible. In particular, our Deputy City Manager, Karen Peters, as well as our incredible Water Services Director, Catherine Sorensen, who will be presenting in just a few moments. This is an incredible partnership among many parties, and it wasn't easy to put together. But our team, this team here at the table and so many others have worked well together to reach what is an essential and forward-thinking solution that will help address one of Arizona's most significant challenges. The Arizona Department of Water Resources and the Bureau of Reclamation, along with the Walton Foundation, have been exceptional partners. And Tom and Leslie, you each represent your agencies very, very well and represent the very best of public service. Governor Lewis, let me in particular thank you and our friends of the Gila River Indian Community. You are a visionary. You recognize that as the largest stakeholder of the Colorado River water in Arizona, the Gila have a special responsibility to lead in shaping a more sustainable water future. Every Arizonan will benefit from your leadership, not just members of the tribal community, all Arizonans. And I want to say thank you for serving as a partner to myself and the City of Phoenix as we work together to tackle these incredibly important challenges. What we're here to talk about today is addressing Arizona's collective challenge. The Colorado River is over-allocated. It's endangered. Lake Mead is less than half full, and climate change is making things worse. I've said this over and over again. We have to protect our water supply, and we have to prepare for climate change. This agreement today is one of the many ways the City of Phoenix is leading the way on climate change to make our city and our state more resilient than ever. And I believe that our city, the city of Phoenix, has a responsibility to lead. Yes, we're the largest city in the state, but more importantly, we're a recognized regional leader when it comes to innovative water management. If we want others to get involved, we have to go first, and this city council understands that. Councilwoman Thelda Williams has been a leading voice on water issues for as long as I can remember, and many of the actions we take today, will likely take today, we've taken in the past because of her steady leadership. Thank you, Councilmember Williams. Just a few months ago, Councilwoman Kate Gallego visited Governor Lewis and the Gila River community to make progress on this very agreement. Her leadership has helped get us to where we are today. Today is the beginning of a long-term partnership that can demonstrate how, even in the toughest political times, if we work together and get creative, we can solve the most difficult challenges, including water shortage on the Colorado River. With that, Catherine, I'll turn it over to you for the presentation. And if my colleagues have any questions, we'll wait till after all the presentation is done, and then we'll turn it over to members of the council and see if any members of the public have comments before we take a vote. Catherine Sorensen, our Water Services Director.
Mayor, thank you. City Council, thank you so much for allowing us to speak on this important issue. As the mayor mentioned, today we're going to talk with you about the Colorado River and specifically about a system conservation program. To get things started, though, we're going to kick off with a very short video. It is narrated by Pat Mulroy, who is a legend on the Colorado River. She was the director of the Southern Nevada Water Authority.
When you start connecting the dots and seeing how one impact triggers reactions and triggers consequences in other areas, you begin to grasp a different understanding of the, quote, system. In the Colorado River, starting at the upper basin, we move the water out of the basin. In Wyoming, we move it to Cheyenne. In Colorado, we go across the Continental Divide to the Front Range cities. Cross over to Utah. Central Utah Project takes the water all the way to the Wasatch Front. Come down to New Mexico. It moves it out of the Colorado River watershed to the Rio, to Albuquerque. Las Vegas uses it. 300 plus miles of Central Arizona Project Aqueduct goes to the central cities from Phoenix all the way down to Tucson. On the other side, it goes all the way to the coastal cities of Southern California. Because Metropolitan Water District of Southern California takes half its water from the Colorado River and half of its water from the Sacramento Bay Delta, they're connected. What happens in the Bay Delta matters in Cheyenne. It is one huge plumbing system that is intricately connected. When you start looking at the system in those terms, it changes your perspective.
So, as the mayor mentioned, the Colorado River is over-allocated. The 7 states that use its water, together with the Republic of Mexico, we demand more from this river than it can produce. And climate change is only going to make that problem worse. Because the Colorado River is over-allocated and the lower basin states take more water out of the river in general in a given year than comes into the river, there is a structural deficit on the river, and that means that water levels in Lake Mead have been declining. We're all familiar with the big bathtub ring that we have seen in pictures in the media that show the impact of this structural deficit in the lower basin. Today, Lake Mead water levels stand around 1,081 feet. The Secretary of the Interior, who is the water master of the Colorado River, he declares increasingly larger shortages as water levels fall to 1075, 1050, and 1025. Nearly all of these cuts fall on central Arizona, whose access to Colorado River water is junior in priority to the agricultural districts in Yuma, in the Central Valley of California, and to the Metropolitan Water District of Southern California. Phoenix is a world-class leader in water planning, and we have planned well for shortage. As we've discussed with you before, the first 2 tiers of shortage on the Colorado River impact stakeholders in central Arizona, but do not impact Phoenix directly. It is really only when we get to the 3rd tier of shortage at levels 1025 in Lake Mead that Phoenix's water is directly impacted. But there again, it eats into a buffer that we have carefully developed over the decades and really impacts the water that we're storing in Tucson aquifers. However, below Lake Mead elevations of 1025, there is no agreement between California, Nevada, Arizona, the Republic of Mexico, and the federal government about what happens next. It is uncharted territory. No one, not Phoenix, not the farmers in Yuma, not the cities of Southern California, not the farmers in the Central Valley in California. None of us are insulated if Lake Mead water elevations fall below 1025 into the unknown. If we do not address this structural deficit, this fundamental problem of overallocation of the Colorado River, we may very well find ourselves in that uncharted territory in the unknown. That's why stakeholders are working collaboratively towards a contingency plan on the Colorado River. Our economies can withstand controlled shortages of known quantities. We can plan for that, but it is difficult to plan for the unknown. And to avoid going below the 3rd tier of shortage and the potentially devastating impacts that that might have to our regional economy, we need to start reducing this structural deficit. So system conservation does exactly that. System conservation occurs when conserved water is left voluntarily and permanently on the river to boost water levels in Lakes Powell and Mead and forestall shortages. So if we collectively take too much water off the river, we have to find a way to collectively leave water on the river. The law of the Colorado River is extremely complex. It is very difficult to force solutions that create winners and losers. Our best option is to create voluntary mechanisms through which those who are willing to leave a little extra water on the river are compensated by those who value the resiliency that that creates. Phoenix's focus needs to be on a river that is resilient for the long term, on a river that has some give. System conservation creates that give. To that end, we are proposing to enter into a system conservation agreement between the City of Phoenix, the Gila River Indian Community, the Bureau of Reclamation, the State of Arizona, and the Walton Family Foundation. Through this agreement, Phoenix, the Bureau of Reclamation, the Walton Foundation, and the State of Arizona will collectively compensate the Gila River Indian Community for 40,000 acre-feet of water that the community will voluntarily leave in Lake Mead as system conservation. It is hoped that this agreement will lay the foundation for future system conservation programs in Arizona that would be open to additional participants and additional funders. Our goal is to continue progress towards a collaborative system conservation program for the long term so that we can reduce the structural deficit and create a more resilient river. So staff recommends that the Phoenix City Council approve an agreement between the City of Phoenix, the State of Arizona, the Bureau of Reclamation, and the Walton Family Foundation, and the Gila River Indian Community to fund 40,000 acre-feet of or 13 billion gallons of system conservation water in Lake Mead. To put this number in context, that is roughly equivalent to 35% of Phoenix's annual draw from the Colorado River for use by its customers. This is a one-year agreement, and Phoenix's contribution of $2 million would come from the Colorado River Resiliency Fund that this council approved back in 2014. I am asking you to fund this one-year agreement for $2 million, but my hope, I think the hope of everyone here at this table, is that we will be back in 6 to 9 months to talk again and present an Arizona plan for implementation of the drought contingency plan between the states of Arizona, California, and Nevada, and asking you to fund system conservation efforts on an ongoing basis. So with that, I would like to turn the time over to Director Tom Bishatsky, Director of the Arizona Department of Water Resources.
Much. Great to see you.
Thanks, Catherine. Thank you, Mayor Stanton, for the kind words about me earlier. And and thank you, council members and mayor, for inviting me to come and speak to you today in support of this cooperative agreement to conserve water in Lake Mead among the City of Phoenix, the Walton Family Foundation, the Gila River Indian Community, the Bureau of Reclamation, and the state of Arizona through my agency, the Department of Water Resources. The state, the city, the Indian community, and all Arizonans who rely on Colorado River water to meet their needs are facing challenges related to the management of the Colorado River and Lake Mead. And Catherine Sorensen talked about some of them. Water use on the Colorado River now exceeds the annual flow of the river. Over the last 30 years, we have seen a reduction in the average annual flow of the river. That is linked to the drought that we have been mired in for the last 17 years, but it is also what we can probably expect for the future, again, due to the issues about warming and climate change. Lake Mead has been on a downward trajectory since 1999, when it was essentially full. Under the operational guidelines pursuant to the law of the river, Lake Mead drops by an average of 12 feet, even in years when we get normal volumes of water delivered from Lake Powell to Lake Mead. That is the structural deficit that you heard about earlier. And it is one of the biggest hurdles we are facing in relation to the management of Lake Mead and the river. Proactively conserving water in Lake Mead helps to mitigate the impacts of the structural deficit, the drought, and the allocation issues. It reduces the likelihood of shortages in both timing and magnitude. That outcome provides benefits to the water users impacted by shortage, but also provides value on a broader scale. For instance, it is essential that we demonstrate to our citizens and potential investors that we are managing our water resources in a proactive manner that maximizes the resiliency of those resources. It is imperative to our economic health, our economic growth, and to our quality of life that we show a continual commitment to sound water resources management. I know that the City of Phoenix has been and is a leader in that regard, and I was fortunate to have been a part of that for over 23 years in my service to the city. Participation by Phoenix in this conservation agreement builds upon the city's long history of leadership in water resources management. This agreement is also made possible by the Gila River Indian community stepping up and exhibiting their desire to be constructive partners as part of the broader water community in Arizona, a great benefit that has flowed out of the water settlement in 2004. Their leadership has been crucial and is a shining example for other tribal communities in the state, who we hope to move into agreements like this in the near future. The Walton Family Foundation's participation will further their goals of having a healthy Colorado River throughout the basin. Their participation opens up an exciting avenue for philanthropic groups to work with water managers to ensure that efforts to achieve sustainability on the river is more inclusive than it has been in the past. The agreement before you today is a first step toward the creation of a broad, inclusive, and enduring system conservation program that builds on the existing pilot program. And it is clear that such a program is needed as one tool to address the health of Lake Mead. We hope it will also help further the discussions within the state about the drought contingency plan between Arizona, Nevada, and California, one that is critical, again, to managing the river and managing the structural deficit, something that I really hope to be in front of the legislature to get their approval for next session. The state understands how important the system conservation program is to our future. Governor Ducey's fiscal year 18 budget proposal included a total of $6 million to fund system conservation over a 3-year period. And we saw on the slide that for this first year, we have $2 million of that 6. The state legislature included that request in its budget that the governor signed. And so with that, I will again urge you to approve this agreement and thank you for the consideration of doing such. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Director Bushowski. I think Leslie Myers is next from the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation. Great to see you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mayor Stanton and Council, for inviting me to be here today. You've heard a lot of facts. I'm sure you'll hear more about the stark reality of the Colorado River. We are in the throes of an unprecedented drought on the Colorado River watershed, And although the hydrology was good in 2017, we're a long way from recovery. Several years ago, the Department of Interior, through the Bureau of Reclamation, and local partners through the state and with Mexico, entered into a pilot system conservation program. That program was defined to try to find innovative ways and partners to help protect the elevations that Catherine spoke of in Lake Mead and protect against shortage declaration. I think you know that at greatest risk of those shortage declarations are the state of Arizona and specifically the Central Arizona Project water users. I think that effort has been quite successful. Since the inception of that program, along with pilot system conservation and other programs, we've added 10 feet to Lake Mead over the last 4 years and effectively kept the system out of shortage. These sorts of programs that we're here to talk about today are very important to the future of the river and to Arizona water supply in general. Earlier this year, the United States entered into a separate agreement with the Gila River Indian community for an additional 40,000 acre feet. And we are happy to be a party to this agreement for a second 40,000 now. We applaud the collaboration brought together by the parties that are here today. It's very, very good from a federal perspective to be able to see the local cooperation and commitment to funding and water for the system. Thank you.
Thank you very much for being here. I should also note that Cynthia Campbell is here, our Water Resource Management Advisor. Thank you for all your education of myself and other members of the council on these important water issues. And then finally, to speak on the agreement is our friend, Governor Stephen Roe Lewis of the Gila River Indian Community. Governor.
Skugtosh. Good day. Mayor Stanton, Vice Mayor Pastor, council members. Thank you for having me here today. It's truly an honor. And on behalf of the community, the Yakima O'odham and Peepash peoples, thank you for your consideration of such an important measure to help address drought in our region. As you know, earlier this year in March, Mayor Stanton, Tom Bushotsky with the Arizona Department of Water Resources, Ted Kowalski with the Walton Family Foundation, and I all signed an agreement of continued cooperation to work on addressing the drought. And today, we now have a more concrete agreement that demonstrates this cooperation. I love when a plan comes together, and it could not have happened without the City of Phoenix's involvement. Thank you to the leadership here. Thank you to your dedicated staff. The community values its relationship, its long history with the City of Phoenix. And we look forward to the future, to continued cooperation, to develop a plan with all stakeholders to implement the drought contingency plan in a manner that makes sense for all Arizonans. Out of these DCP discussions, the community and Phoenix have found ways to work together to take the first steps in developing what I think will be a long-term partnership, a strong partnership, to ensure water supply for both our communities. If Colorado River water deliveries ever have to be reduced because of severe drops in Lake Mead. But the agreement today will help reduce the risk of severe drops in Lake Mead ever having to take place, and the community is honored to be working with you to help benefit Arizona and build a foundation for continued success and multilateral efforts to address drought in our region. As neighbors, we can accomplish great things together, and agreements like this one, and I'll have to say it, historic agreements like this one, make it easier for us to work together on other matters that may impact our communities from time to time. Again, thank you for having me and allowing my words that I bring words of hope from the Gila River Indian community, and all of you all have an open invitation if you ever want to visit the community. You are our trusted and our valued neighbors moving forward. Thank you so much. Masako.
Thank you for those outstanding words, Governor Lewis, your friendship support. Obviously, as we said before, we would not be here without your personal leadership. Now I'll turn it to members of the City Council, so you have a motion and a second, and then I'll see if there's any comments or questions from members of Council. Councilmember Williams.
Thank you, Mayor. I want to thank all the parties that have been involved in this. This just didn't happen in March. It's been going, the discussion has been going for quite a while. And sitting at this table are people who have the vision, who have the Arizona spirit to work together. You have always been pioneers, but I think this is a clear demonstration on leadership and looking to our future. My little tiny role I'm very proud of, and thank heavens we have you who are so knowledgeable. I'm just so proud of this agreement, for the mayor's involvement, his cooperation and support of this project. I am hoping that this brings others to the table to recognize the importance of this agreement today. So, Mayor, with great pride, I move approval of this.
We have a motion in favor of the proposal. Is there a second?
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Now I'll turn to members of the council. If any comments or questions? Councilman DeCiccio, please.
Thank you, Mayor. And I want to give special consideration and thanks to Governor Lewis and yourself, Mayor, for taking the lead on this. If you look at Arizona's history in particular, it was done because of innovative individuals who saw water as our primary concern and our primary reason of our quality of life that we have in the state. And everything that was done in the past was done because of people that were willing to, literally take the lead on this, like everybody at the table here today, from the state of Arizona to the Gila River Indian community to the city of Phoenix, Mayor Stanton and others up here that have worked on this. I think Councilwoman Williams and I were probably the only ones that were back in the 1990s when we had a lot of pressure on us not to go forward with the Water Settlement Act. And that Water Settlement Act put everything in play as it is today. Had we not had that today, we would not have been here today. And just as a matter of perspective, I don't think people realize what occurred with, in particular, the Gila River Indian community and the waters that were taken from them for many, many years. If you look back, if you look at the Gila River the Gila River itself, that used to be full of cottonwood. It used to be very green and lush, and then because of the damming that was done further up, it prevented water there, created a situation where there was an exodus of the population. I mean, it was just a really horrible situation, and all those things got righted back in the 1990s. And it should have been done earlier, but it wasn't, and then it took, leaders at the time to do that. And then today you have an innovated, you have to find a way to manage, protect our water resources. That is the most critical thing that comes out of this meeting today. Everything is about that protection. It's about making sure that if you start draining Lake Mead and it starts getting down, it becomes ecologically a problem. You cannot allow that to happen. And so I just want to thank all the individuals that were involved in this. I think it's critical. But it's the leadership like this that every 20 years or so, people come up with innovative ideas and innovative ways of solving these problems, and historic. And because this is historic, it's a way of preserving water at the same time preserving our future. And people don't realize how important that is. And so, Mayor, again, I want to give you a lot of credit. Governor Lewis, a lot of credit to you, to all the individuals here at the table. Much credit to you, because it's not easy forging these types of agreements. Fully supportive of it, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you for those great comments. Other members of the council, comments or questions? Councilwoman Gallego?
Thank you. Governor, it is wonderful to have you join us. It was an honor to be able to join you in your much nicer council chambers. And they're beautiful.
The truth hurts. Yeah.
We are fiscally responsible. I think you came here at great personal effort, and we really appreciate that and our long partnership. I am lucky to share a border of my council district with the Gila River Indian community and have had great partners. You've supported us on a huge number of things, even helping with our police department get good equipment, or helping fund efforts in my district to fight homelessness or food security in the community. So this is a great partnership, and as you said, our work here today makes it easier to do other work together. We all today have recognized that in Arizona Water, we stand on the back of giants who got us where we are today, and have the opportunity to move forward a little bit and do our part. I was a junior water rights analyst right after the water settlement, went through when we were implementing it, and there was great hope that the water settlement would deliver benefits for the Gila River Indian community, for the environment, for the people in the valley. Today's vote will help us do just that, to realize that vision that we had, and a huge testament to the entire Lewis family who has really stewarded that through. We really appreciate the leadership of your father, and that you have not only committed to building upon his legacy, but taking it to the next level. I think today's agreement really shows some moral leadership. We did not have to do this agreement, but we stepped up and said, we will all work together. One could say that the majority of the people who will benefit from this today are outside of the city of Phoenix, and we are proud to help make that a reality, help invest also. I think the environment will benefit, and I hope this will set the stage so that Tom Bushatsky can go down there and represent us well, and realize that he has great partners and great support as we negotiate a longer-term regional solution. So it, I think, puts us all really in a good place moving forward. We appreciate the Bureau being so involved. I think this has gotten attention at the very highest level of the Bureau, and thank you for that partnership and really saying that getting this right for the Colorado River matters so much to our entire country. This has national importance. The city of Phoenix is just a small part of it. So with our great partners here today, this is a very important vote that hopefully will be a foundation for long-term solutions. Thank you to Catherine Sorensen for her leadership, Deputy City Manager Peters, and our entire team at the City of Phoenix for making this happen. When I'm going to admit, when we first pitched looking at the resiliency fund, I was a little bit skeptical, and you have convinced me that this was the right thing to do, and Mayor Stanton really pushed for that the whole time, so a credit to the mayor for thinking long-term and thinking that we can't just think locally, but need to think regionally and continue Phoenix's long-standing role as one of the many of the leaders in this community. So congratulations to everyone involved. I look forward to supporting this.
Thank you very much, Councilwoman. Other members of the council? Councilwoman Stark.
Thank you, Mayor. About a year ago, the City of Phoenix was a host for the National Planning Conference. So planners from all across the United States came to Arizona, and they were in awe on what we do when it comes to water. I think a lot of them didn't think we take this issue seriously, but we showed them through a lot of different seminars and workshops that we really are creative, we're innovative, and we really are concerned about this issue, water. And today I think is just another example of us working together to be creative and innovative. And I want to thank you, Mayor, for stepping up and making sure we address this issue. And I want to thank Councilwoman Williams, because I know you've been on this issue for a long time as well. But I do want to thank Governor Lewis. Really, it is about partnerships. And I want to thank the state and the Bureau. We really are blessed to have such great partners that make us look good, not just locally, but nationally. And thank you so much, and thanks to our staff.
Thanks for those great words. Any other comments by members of the City Council? Okay, we have a motion in favor of the proposal. We have a second. Let's do a roll call.
DeCiccio. Gallego.
Yes.
Nowakowski.
Yes.
Stark.
Yes.
Valenzuela.
Yes.
Waring.
Yes.
Williams.
Yes.
Pastor.
Yes.
Mayor Stanton.
Yes, so the plan passes unanimously. Congratulations, everyone. We'll take a short break now so we can do the photo session and celebrate this moment, and we'll Photoshop Councilman Waring into the photo. All right, we'll take a short 5-minute break. All right, welcome back, everyone. We are back on with today's policy session of the Phoenix City Council. We just did item number 1. We'll move on to item number 2 on today's agenda. Item number 2 on today's agenda is a discussion, but not an action item today, information discussion on public safety pension payment options. So I believe our city manager is going to present this item and give us a thorough report on all of the options that the city council has to move forward with as it relates to some options that the legislature passed and the governor signed as past legislative options. We will be making a decision as a council at a future council meeting about whether we adopt the option presented by the legislature and governor. So I'll let the city manager move forward. Similar to the last time, I request that we get through the entire presentation, and then I'll turn it over to members of the council. Again, no motion on this item because it's not an action item, but to see if there's any questions or comments on the options and the recommendation made by our city manager. City manager.
Thank you, Mayor Stanton and members of the council. So as the mayor noted, today's item is to provide basically a study session about our police and fire pensions known as PSPRS, Public Safety Personnel Retirement System, which is a significant policy decision on our police and fire pension programs that we believe is fiscally responsible and doesn't change our obligation to our police officers and firefighters. As you mentioned, Mayor, we're not taking action today. We will bring an action item forward on June 21st, and we'll explain that timing in just a minute. As it relates to the PSPRS pension obligations, there are really two main considerations that we're working on here. So I'll start with the first one, which is continuing to meet our obligations for the pensions of our police officers and firefighters. Let me make it perfectly clear that nothing we'll discuss today or recommend to you will jeopardize the pension obligations we have for our retired and active police and fire employees. The second thing that we're working on is to continue and balancing is continuing to provide general funded services that our residents demand and deserve. 2/3 of that is public safety, police, fire, and the courts. So the decision we have is to set the minimum amount to pay. And we can always choose to pay more, just like homeowners can always choose to pay more on their mortgage payment. The decision is about providing options and flexibility in the event of an economic downturn. So this important conversation is just one of several steps we'll be taking to solve the projected 2018-19 budget deficit. And it's a conversation about how to balance services to our community today while we fund retirement for our police officers and firefighters tomorrow. So we're here today because rising PSPRS pension payments throughout the entire state of Arizona are placing burdens on cities, towns, counties, and fire districts, including us. In response, the PSPRS board advocated for, the legislature passed, and Governor Ducey signed a law that took effect with an emergency clause on May 18th. That timing allows us to consider changes immediately, which is why we're here today, before the start of the fiscal year on July 1. The law signed by the governor allows cities to choose a longer period to pay their pension liability. It does not destabilize or jeopardize PSPRS pensions. Rather, it provides a fiscally responsible option for cities to balance their obligations to pay pensions with the need to provide services to residents. So I have today here Chief Financial Officer Denise Olson and Budget and Research Director Jeff Barton, who will explain what the law means, what our options are, as you noted, Mayor, these options, pros and cons, and also answer any questions that help your policy decision on June 21st. So with that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Barton.
Thank you so much. Mr. Barton.
Mayor, members of the council, good afternoon. As the city manager mentioned, we're going to take a few moments and give you a very deep dive on a very complex topic, which is public safety pension. I'm going to start by giving you some background information on the PSPRS plan itself, as well as some background information on what that plan has meant to the city of Phoenix from a general fund operating budget perspective. Many of the slides that I'll be talking to you about today are slides that we've seen over the last couple of months as we've gone through the budget development process. So a lot of it will be old hat to you, but again, it provides a lot of good information. So let's start with an overview of PSPRS. As many of you know, the PSPRS plan was enacted or established by the state legislature back in 1968. Since that time, it's gone through numerous revisions, most recently in fiscal year in 2017. For the City of Phoenix, the PSPRS plan covers the costs of our public safety personnel, our police officers and our firefighters. As of today, the current active roster contains about 3,700 active employees and about 3,800, almost 3,900 retirees. Based on our portion of the plan, the Phoenix Police portion is about 46.7% funded, and the fire portion is about 48.4% funded. The net pension liability, as of recent evaluation, police is about $1.38 billion, and fire is about $0.722 billion. So a combined net liability of about $2.1 billion. This slide you've definitely seen many times over the last couple of months. This is the slide that illustrates the City of Phoenix employer contribution. So this is the rates that these slides represent the rate that we pay PSPRS for administering our pension plan for our Phoenix police officers and our Phoenix firefighters. As you can see on this slide, one line representing fire, one line representing the police rate. You can see that these lines have tracked each other very closely over the last 11 years. So to make things simple and to illustrate, I'm going to really focus on the police portion of our rate just to make it a little simpler for everyone. So going back to 2007, 2008, you can see that the rate that the city paid for contributions for PSPRS was about 19%. So that meant for every $10,000 in compensation that our police officers and firefighters made, we sent a check to the state for $1,900. To put a finer point on that, a compensation of about $100,000 for a police officer or a firefighter carried with it a corresponding check being sent to the state for about $20,000. Fast forward 10 years to the current budget, and you can see that that rate increased to 48.17%. So that means for every $10,000 in compensation, we're sending $4,800 to the state. Or for $100,000 in compensation, we're sending $48,000 to the state. Next fiscal year, based on the budget that we tentatively adopted, that you tentatively adopted last week, it reflected a pension rate going up again to 67%. So for every $10,000 in compensation, we will be sending $6,700 to PSPRS. Or again, $100,000 in compensation carries with it a contribution to PSPRS of roughly $67,000. Before I move off from this slide, I want to emphasize one thing. This is not unique to Phoenix. Phoenix is not the only employer in the entire state of Arizona experiencing this problem as it pertains to PSPRS. In fact, if you look in your packet on page 16, you will notice a variety of different municipalities, jurisdictions, fire districts, all employers that participate in PSPRS, many of which have rates equal to or greater than Phoenix. I say that because this is not a Phoenix-only problem. This is a problem faced by many others in the PSPRS plan. So when we transition from rates and look at the contributions in total that we've made from the general fund, that's what this slide focuses on. So you can see in fiscal year 07-08, we made pension contribution payments of about $56 million out of the general fund. Those contributions increased over the last 10 years by about 168% to where we are today in the current year budget of about $150 million. Next fiscal year, again, we've discussed this at length, we expect to see an increase in our PSPRS costs because of that change from 48% to roughly 67% for police and 63% for fire. We expect to see a $207 million contribution being made out of the general fund. That's about a 40% increase over today's current costs. And if you look at the remaining 4 years of our 5-year forecast, we expect those costs to continue to go up by about another 13% through fiscal year 21-22. Another way to look at our pension contributions from PSPRS are to look at them from the standpoint of how much of our budget do they reflect, or how much of our general fund operating budget do they consume. So if you look at this slide, it illustrates that point. So in 07-08, our PSPRS contributions, the payments that we sent to the state, made up about 5.1% of our budget. This current fiscal year, they make up about 12.2% of our budget. Next year, we expect it to reflect about 16.2% of our total budget. And again, you look at the remaining 4 years of our 5-year forecast, we expect to see payment contributions equal to about 17, almost 18% of our general fund operating budget. Now, looking at pension costs as a whole, not just PSPRS, as you know, and those watching know, we also have another pension system that is over our civilian employees. So looking at those combined, you can see another trend developing here. So if you look at 07, 08, our budget, we paid roughly 9% of our budget into pension, being PSPRS and COPERS. This fiscal year, that has risen up to about 19%. The remaining 4 years of our forecast, you see those costs will increase to about 24, 25, and even 26% in some of those budgetary fiscal years. One thing I also emphasize on this slide, you will see the impact of pension reform, the reform that you led and that our citizens voted for on the civilian side. You see how the portion of our budget that's reflected or covered by civilian pension, you can see it flattening out over the remainder of our 5-year forecast. So why is this important? This is important because, again, that slide illustrates how much of our operating budget is consumed by pension. And again, we have a balanced budget for next fiscal year, but as we've talked all throughout this budget development process, fiscal year 18-19 looks like we could have a little bit of a challenge on our hand, and we could experience a shortfall of between $43 and $64 million. Pension, at that point in time, will make up about $310 million of our total expenses. So again, roughly 1/4, a quarter, of our expenditures planned for 18-19 will be made up of pension. And that is one of the reasons we're here talking to you today about this topic. With that, I'll pass it on to Denise, and she will carry in the rest of the presentation.
Thank you very much. Denise?
Thank you, Mayor and City Council. I'd like to continue the discussion by going through some basic definitions. First, we have the annual required contributions, also known as the ARC. This is basically the annual payment we are required to pay to make sure we pay down the liability over a defined period of time. The second definition is the unfunded accrued liability, the UAL. Jeff referred to it as the net pension liability. And basically, this is just the amount of the loan, or the amount that we still have to pay. The next definition you'll hear is a closed amortization period. And all this means is that at the end of the amortization period, our liability will be zero. So we will pay off the loan 100% by the end of the period. Now, the other thing you'll see in rating agency reports is a term related to budget flexibility. So what the rating agencies are looking at is our ability to handle a downturn in the economy. So they're going to look at three things. Number one, what is our ability to raise revenue? Number two, how much do we have in fund reserves for like a rainy day fund? And number three, they're going to look at our ability to cut cost. As Jeff described, our ARC payments, or our annual payments to pension, are considered fixed cost. We also have debt service, and that's considered a fixed cost. So as our fixed costs become a higher percentage of our budget, that gives you less flexibility to handle a downturn in the economy because our costs are fixed versus variable. So want to walk through the impacts of the different amortization periods. So let's take an example of a house. Let's say we have a house for $250,000 and there's an interest rate of 3%, and we're going to buy the house in 2017. If we look at different loan periods, if you look at a 20-year loan period, you can see that the monthly payments will be $1,400. If you stretch that loan out to 30 years, you can see that that monthly loan payment decreases to about $1,000. So there is an advantage of when you have a longer amortization period, your monthly payments are less. However, when you do that, you have an unpaid balance, which means you're going to be paying more in total interest cost. So now if you look at the interest we would have to pay for a $250,000 house, on a 20-year loan you would pay an additional $86,000 versus a 30-year loan you're going to pay $132,000. So increasing your amortization period does increase your total cost. Now in all three of these scenarios you have a closed amortization period, meaning you pay off that house by the end of the period. But really, this illustration shows you that there is a trade-off between lower monthly payments and budget flexibility versus an increase in the total cost. So now let's go through the options that we're presenting to you today. We have 4 of them. So starting with option A, this is basically status quo. Currently, we have a 20-year amortization period. If you go with this option, there's no impact on interest. However, there's also no impact on our budget flexibility. And as Jeff showed you, our fixed costs continue to rise with increasing pension payments. Option B, this is a 30-year option. We would start this in fiscal year 18-19. The council would have to make a decision on this in the fall and the winter. Now, in this option, as I illustrated in the previous slide, there is additional interest of about $2.3 billion. However, it does provide annual relief to the budget of about $15 to $25 million. Again, this would start in fiscal year 18-19. Option C is the same as option B, except for we would implement this year, so it'd be for fiscal year 17-18. And what that's going to allow us to do is, if you remember, the 17-18 year budget is balanced, and it's balanced based on a 20-year amortization schedule. So if we elect a 30-year amortization schedule, we're going to have a one-time savings of about $30 to $35 million. We're proposing that we take this savings and we put it into a pension reserve fund that would be solely for the purpose of helping us absorb future increases in our ARC or a downturn in the economy to help us pay for pension cost. The next option, the last option, is a hybrid. And in this option, the council would have to make an election by June 21st, the same as option C. This would elect a 30-year amortization period. However, as Ed mentioned, and as you can on a house mortgage, you can always pay more. So when we continue this example, we made the assumption that we'd pay based on a 25-year amortization period. This would be an additional $1.1 billion of interest. We would still achieve some budget flexibility of about $10 to $15 million annually. We would be able to seed a pension reserve fund. And really, this gives the council the most in terms of flexibility and options in dealing with the budget deficit in 18-19. Now, we did do our due diligence here to make sure we looked at ourselves compared to other cities. And we stumbled across a survey that was done by Loop Capital. They looked at 154 pension plans and found that over 40% have amortization periods of 30 years. Some examples include ASRS and also the states of California, Texas, and Ohio for police and fire pension plans, and also many cities such as Indianapolis. So our recommendation here today is the hybrid option D. What this does is, as Ed mentioned, it sets an ARC payment at a minimum, because remember, the state law requires us to pay 100% of the ARC. So it sets a minimum at 30 years, starting in fiscal year 17-18. However, the council can choose to pay more. This also allows us to establish a pension reserve fund for additional assurances. It stabilizes services and sustains programs while maintaining police officers and firefighters. It allows flexibility during an economic downturn. And again, I want to stress, the liability at the end of the amortization period will be paid down to zero. And with that, I'll turn this back over to Ed.
Mayor,
Thank you so much,
Thank
Mr.
you,
Manager.
This is a open session discussion information. We're happy to answer questions or dive into any part that Mayor or council members would like to.
I thank you very much for that very thorough presentation, and obviously, the recommendation from our professional staff is option D. I'll now have citizens who wish to comment on this have a chance to do so now before I turn it over to the City Council. Brian Tobin, did you want to provide testimony on this item? I have other cards not wishing to speak. While Brian's walking down, I'll list those now. Toby Sexton is in favor of the proposal, not wishing to speak. If you change your mind, let us know. Ken Crane, President of Phoenix Law Enforcement Association, is in favor of the staff proposal, the hybrid D. And then Michael London, you're not marked in favor or opposed. Is Michael here? Okay, we'll mark his card for the record, but there's no indication of which side he's on. Mr. Tobin, good to see you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. Appreciate the opportunity to speak to you today. My name is Brian Tobin. I represent, at this point, I'm representing the United Phoenix Firefighters Association and President Steve Berline, who are in support of changing our amortization period in the city of Phoenix to 30 years. Some of you may not know, but I also sit as the chairman of the Public Safety Personnel Retirement System Board of Trustees. I sit on that board as a result of the election from the members of the Phoenix firefighters to allow me to sit on the Phoenix Fire Pension Board. And I am an active firefighter on that board, currently serving as a deputy chief of the Phoenix Fire Department. I came here today to just offer some perspective on what PSPRS has been through over the last decade and a half, of which only 8.5 years of that time I have sat on the board, but I have personal relationships with others who have been there before me, me having replaced Billy Shields, who was there, and Pat can tell me back 2 decades ago. So we've got quite a list of folks that have been there trying to do the right thing for PSPRS. Certainly the biggest thing that I want you all to understand is that none of you or none of us did anything to put us in this situation that we're in. There's been some significant events that have occurred throughout the last 2 decades that get us to this point, and we're all just trying to find the best way to get through it. But to give you some perspective, the public safety personnel retirement system lost about $1.5 billion in the 2 years, 2000 and 2001. Now that may seem a long time ago, but $1.5 billion in loss in those 2 years wasn't $1.5 billion that is now on the rise because we were in some type of a fund that lost some money, and now we're having a comeback. Quite honestly, 12 investments at that time that we invested, PSPRS invested in direct companies at that time, unfortunately, went to zero and essentially filed bankruptcy. So there was no rise. It was a $1.5 billion liability that the system lost. And you'll see that in all your numbers and your charts about what happened in 2000 and 2001. So you see that happening, and then just as we think that we get out of that and with a 7-year smoothing period and move our losses over 7 years, you have a global financial crisis in 2008 and 2009, hit public pension plans all over the country. PSPRS is a little bit better situated at that time, but clearly take a significant hit as the rest of the country did, but then also we lose a little bit more because we have invested in Southwest real estate, particularly in Arizona, as a targeted investment years ago to put our pension dollars into the community where we work, and in a rising economic time period, it was the right thing to do, and we made a lot of money before that time period. So there are a lot of things that happen that get us here that have a lot of liability. As also what happens is the board tries to do the right thing by changing some of the assumptions on how much interest we're going to earn, because as we all know, the bond market has gone down to all-time lows. Treasuries don't earn us a whole lot of money. You may as well put it under your pillow at times. A little bit of safety, but not a lot of money. So the system has to either make up the difference there, or we have to find investments elsewhere. So the board makes significant changes to how we do business to put ourselves in a better financial environment, but it also causes you additional costs because the liabilities go up. I just want to say that we've been working really hard to make PSPRS more stable, but it's like, and the legislature has been doing the same, but it's like moving a battleship. Nothing happens fast. We tried to move fast when Senate Bill 1609 was passed, and quite honestly, my brother was the majority leader at the time in the legislature, so I know a little bit about what happened with 1609, and most of the things, the significant changes to that time period were reversed in the courts, with the case with Ken Fields against the elected officials retirement plan, and now most recently Judge Hall on the elected officials retirement plan that rolled everything back that you could account for active or for retired members and for active employees, that you couldn't change the rules on them once they started. So we're living now at this point in all of those liabilities associated with paying additional fees for court cases. So I just wanted to let you know that there's a lot that's been going on. It's been a really difficult time for us. The Board of Trustees requested this change to the liability from 20 to 30 years. It actually was 30 years just 2 years ago, and we turned to 20 years with the passage of 1428, which was another reform measure. We felt like it was your decision. The Board of Trustees felt like it was the local jurisdiction's decision to decide how long a period of time they should pay off their liabilities, and it shouldn't be the legislature's job to tell you what that was. And they passed the bill to give you this flexibility that you have today. Whether you exercise it or not is up to you. We certainly wish you would, but it's also not the end of the story. If you do this, or even if you don't do this, you have large employer contribution rates for PSPRS, and they will go on essentially for 30 years unless you find some other mechanism to pay down pension liabilities. We're certainly willing to work with you on whatever those might be. We have some ideas. There's a lot of smart people in this room and in this city that can help us. But please just think this as one tool in your toolbox to help with the crushing pension liability debts that you have today. And with that, I'm done with my comments. Thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you very much, Brian, for that testimony and for your active leadership on the PSPRS board. I have no other cards. Is anyone else here in the audience wishing to provide testimony to this council during the study session on public safety pension payment options? Okay, with that, I'll now turn it over to members of the city council. Does any city council member wish to provide either comments or questions on this item? Vice Mayor?
I wanted to look at one of the, it's not this slide, it's, whoa. Yes, it's underneath. Allows flexibility during an economic downturn. What does that mean?
Yes, thank you, Mayor, Vice Mayor. What that means is that if you elect a 30-year amortization period, and let's say you pick to pay on a 25-year amortization period, the 30-year is the minimum. Okay, so you can always go down if there's an economic downturn. So you can always decrease your payment to PSPRS to match that 30-year amortization schedule. The other thing that this option does is it establishes a pension reserve fund. And again, that pension reserve fund can be used during an economic downturn towards paying your pension cost.
Okay, so when we, because I'm assuming, and so I need to get clarity, that we will, when we vote for this in June 21st, I think, that the pension reserve fund, how much will go into the pension reserve fund?
So if we implement this for fiscal year 17-18, the amount that will go into the pension reserve fund will be the difference between what the council decides to pay PSPRS for that fiscal year versus the 20-year amortization schedule ARC payment. So let's say that they pick 30 years. The difference between a 30-year amortization ARC payment versus the 20-year amortization ARC payment, we're estimating to be about $30 to $35 million. So that money would then be used to seed the pension reserve fund.
Okay, and so then that's why, say, I don't know, say, I'm gonna say 3 years, we've had a pension reserve fund, so 3 years, 90, and then we have a downturn. Then the pension reserve fund will still stay there. We will just change the amount that we would pay. Say we were paying for a 25-year, and we're really actually a 30, and so we will adjust the payment. Is that how I'm getting it?
Yes, that's correct. The other way to look at it is it's almost like a shock absorber for the budget process. So instead of having to take major cuts in the budget because of a downturn in the economy, we might be able to use that pension reserve fund to supplement the ARC payments to PSPRS.
Okay.
So as an example, how we talked about pension, PSPRS in particular, was getting upwards of 18% of our total general fund operating budget. Let's say 1 year into the future, that shoots up to 25%, and we were only budgeting for about 18%. You could use that pension reserve fund to bridge the gap, so you don't have to take cuts to services and programs.
Okay. I just want to make sure, sorry, Mayor.
Sure. I was going to ask the city manager, do you have anything to add to that? assuming this council supports the recommendation of option D, what you'd recommend for how much would go into the reserve fund?
Yeah, I would just want to clarify one thing in addition to that too. I think I heard Councilwoman Pastor saying after 3 years it would be 90. We won't get that high. We're not going to save $30 million every year. The first year, because we've already budgeted at the 207 level, we think that the payment under a 30-year amortization would be $30 to $35 million less than that. But after that, it will be somewhere in between 10 and $15 million that would be reduced. So it won't go to 90. But the way I would look at it is, to your point about flexibility, Vice Mayor, if you think about a house mortgage, and Denise showed this, if you set your budget, if you set the payment at a 30-year rate, and let's say it's $1,000, then, and you budget to pay more, you want to pay it as if it's a 15-year, and that would be $1,400 in that example. And then something happens, the air conditioner goes out on your house unexpectedly, and you got to pay a big air conditioner bill. You can drop back to the $1,000 monthly payment, and the bank is satisfied because that's all they're expecting from you. And you have that $400 of flexibility to pay for the air conditioner, and you don't lose your house. If you're set at the 15-year mortgage amount of $1,400, and the air conditioner goes out, you've got to pay $1,400 plus find the money for the air conditioner. So that sort of simplifies it down to think about what that flexibility means. Is there's a minimum, we can pay more, we would propose to pay more, we would have the pension reserve fund available to help us pay more, but as Denise held it, it's a shock absorber in between, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I just want to make sure when it says allows flexibility, that it's really allowing flexibility, that money towards the pension, and not, if there's a downturn, not to touch the pension reserve fund for other items, general fund items.
Mayor, Vice
So
Mayor,
I wanna
thank you. Yeah, and what we would propose is to put the pension reserve fund into an ordinance which states that intention. Well, the council would have to pass that. It would state the purpose of the pension reserve fund is for pension, not for something else, to your
Okay.
point.
Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. I don't know if you want to talk maybe if there's an apples to apples comparison with our general fund reserve fund that I think this council over a decade or so has really worked hard not to touch and to increase that reserve fund, which has helped our credit rating tremendously. Mr. Barton.
Correct. It's very similar. So as you know, we've got the contingency fund, which we've been trying to grow to 5%, and we're at about a little over 4% now. So this would serve the same purpose. So in the event that we have any significant issue that we have to deal with in any given fiscal year in the operating budget, we can rely on the contingency fund if we should have to do that. But that takes an act of this council to actually dip into the contingency fund. The pension reserve fund would function very much the same way.
The other thing I'd add about the pension reserve, Mayor, is it's not exclusive to this that we could put money in there. So, for example, recently the council set aside $500,000 from an excess from the Tatum Ranch Facilities District to be used for next year's budget. You could also decide to put that into the pension reserve fund. Sales of land, other things can go into that pension reserve fund, but we would set it up as the Vice Mayor was headed towards, which is that its use then could be only for pensions.
Thank you very much. Anything else, Vice Mayor? Councilman Gallego?
Yeah, thank you. Cities across the country are dealing with this, and Phoenix is certainly not immune to this problem. I think for many of us, this was a problem that was here when we arrived, so it was not a problem we created, but it is our responsibility to address it in a sustainable way. It's very important to me today that none of the proposals on the table today would do anything to address the fact that we have to pay for today's police and firefighters today. So all of our currents, regardless of what we decide to do, everyone who is working for the system today, we are fully funding their retirement, and we are investing in the people who are investing us today. So today is really about, we have a huge debt that we need to deal with in a responsible way. I think we got tools from the legislature, so Governor Ducey signed this bill and it passed unanimously. We have a very conservative legislature, and they all felt like this was a responsible tool that we ought to have. And it's certainly not it's a tool that's been used elsewhere in Arizona. So Governor Brewer took this tool for the ASRS system in 2013, so it's certainly not unusual. And we saw, thank you for the data, that it's been used really across the country and pretty regularly. And I think it is responsible to say, people who are using our park system or our library system today, young people, didn't create this large debt. Do we do all of the cuts and take away services from them today, even though they didn't cause it? Or do we try to spread this over a longer period so that there is equity between generations, and that I think that is a responsible thing to do. It's very important to me that when we're done paying, we'll be done with this debt. And so this isn't something where we're forever pushing it forward, but saying we need to step up today and look at what is the responsible rate. I do want us to, as much as possible, pay ahead so that when we have the fiscal ability to do so, we are paying it down. I really appreciate the Vice Mayor's leadership on saying that the pension reserve fund is only for pension costs. That will be very important to me, to say we are setting up a structure where we are prioritize. We're going to have a lot of difficult decisions coming forward, but as we make the decision this month, we need to say pension reserve fund is only for pension reserve, and gives us that flexibility. So I appreciate you giving us these options and spending a lot of time really thinking it through. This was not an easy decision. We are dealing with decisions elected officials made before us generally, and so we have to deal and take on the challenge that as given to us in the most responsible way. And so I appreciate the options that you have given us here today.
Thank you very much, Councilwoman. Councilwoman Stark, please.
Yeah, I just a question between option C and D. If we chose to do option C, could we still try to pay it off earlier?
Councilwoman Stark, members of the council, yes, you can. So again, we're setting the arc. So we're asking the state to give us the arc. So if we opt for a 30-year payment, a 30-year amortization, you can always pay more. There's nothing that precludes the city from paying more. We would just have to build that into our budget process and look at the ramifications of doing so. But yes, you can always pay more.
And just to clarify, really, options C and D are the same in timing and amortization period. The difference between C and D is D does what you said, Councilwoman, which is you pay it earlier. C would just be take the 30 and pay it on a 30 schedule. D says take the 30,
Okay.
but pay it on a 25 or some other schedule that you choose.
Okay,
That's really the only difference between C and D.
All right, I wanted to better understand that. And so, under D, then we make that motion, we're committed to 25 years, finding ways to get us to the 25-year payout as opposed to, even though we're going to amortize it 30 years, we're making a commitment through that motion that we will pay it off in 25 years?
Yes, that would
Okay.
be the stated policy. The council would be to do that. And so what we would do is that Jeff would show in a budget the difference between a 30 and a 25, if the 25 is where the council went next week.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Other members of the council? Councilman DeCiccio, please.
Well, I don't know where to start on this, and I'll temper my comments as well too, but I've heard a lot of if we can try, but I don't hear anything about saying we will do it this way. And then I hear words like stated policy. Okay, those are policy changes that can change year to year. This could be rolled over next year, could be rolled over the year after, correct?
Once you choose the amortization period, that is set. So choosing the 30 or the 20 or the 25, that's a set thing with PSPRS. The pension reserve fund will be established through ordinance, which of course the council always has the discretion and the ability of current council can't bind a future council. And the idea of the 25-year payoff of the 30, the option D, that would be a stated policy of the council, which of course the council would act upon every year.
Has the city, well, the way I'm reading this, correct me if I'm wrong, 30-year amortization with a 25-year possible, correct?
That is what option D would say, yes,
So,
Councilman.
but that's not a for sure that way. So essentially, instead of writing 1.1 billion, because you don't know what that number could be, it could really be $2.3 billion if the city makes the decision not to pay it down, correct?
Yeah, you could, go ahead, Jeff.
Sure, if the council elected to pay on a 30-year schedule, you'd sit at the $2.3 billion. But again, I think what the city manager referenced is every year, when budget and research comes back with the 5-year forecast, we would show you two different scenarios. We would show you the payment under a 30-year scenario. We would also show you the payment under a 25-year scenario. So then we would be building our base budget under the assumption of one of those two, depending on what your direction is at that particular point in time and what the status of the budget is.
A lot of that's still not sure. So the way I see it, it's just basically a 30-year. Has the city of Phoenix ever paid down a pension? Ever? Made an extra payment?
I think there may have been legal limitations on that previously, but Mr. Manager.
Why would that be?
I think we have made extra.
We've actually made extra pension payments in the past.
When was that?
We actually did a little bit last year.
How much?
I can't remember off the top of my head, Councilman. But I know previously, prior to my term, going way back, I think we've done it in the past as well.
I'd like to see when, if that's possible. I don't think it'll ever be substantial enough. Essentially, what the city of Phoenix is looking at right now is a $2.3 billion extra expense, because regardless of what's written up there, unless it's set in stone, I mean, if you're going to do that, why not just do a 25-year right off the bat?
Well, I think it goes to the value of flexibility. So it's I go back to the example of, if you budget yourself at a 30-year mortgage, you make payments as long as you're able to at 15 years. If you hit a rough patch, you're not going to lose your house because you pay your 30-year mortgage amount and you're able to take care of the air conditioner, the kids' school, or whatever, as opposed to you lock yourself in at that higher payment. You are locked in no matter what happens. That may be a value that people like. That's a policy option. What we're saying is, we would advise is pay the full amount that we're required to pay under the 30, pay more where we are able, and if we hit a rough patch, we have some flexibility to move and deal with that. So,
can you define to me what a rough patch is? Because right now we're in the
2008, 2009, when we had to cut $277 million out of the budget over a 2-year period.
So right now, the city of Phoenix is experiencing the most revenues it's ever had in his city history, and we're looking at a budget deficit. Would that be considered a rough patch?
Well, I think the most revenues in history outpaced by the highest PSPRS budget pension payments in history. So I have to say, we have to look at both sides of that equation. Yes, our revenues are up, but as we showed here graphically, our pension obligations are up even more. And so that's where we're saying we've got to get some relief from that. So yeah, I would call this a rough patch. I think the council did a great job this year of steering us through 17-18, and we're looking ahead at 18-19, and I think a potential $60 million deficit in 1 year would be a rough patch. This gives us flexibility to be able to deal with that.
And then why police and fire pensions? Why them?
Because the legislature passed and Governor Ducey signed something that relates to PSPRS. And so that's what we have today, is the ability to do that as the city based on state legislation.
Can we, the civilian pensions, could that have been extended out? I think it's 22 years right now, correct?
The COPERS system is different from the state. I'll let Denise explain what COPERS is able to do with its amortization.
Right, so currently, COPERS amortization period is 22 years, you're correct. It's run by a board, and so that board makes the decisions on the amortization period. The city of Phoenix can certainly ask the board to look into increasing that period as well. But at the end, the board has a final decision on that.
And the board is made up of mostly city employees. Do you think that they would do this to themselves? Would they extend their own pension debt?
I think they'd have to look and see if that made sense in the COPERS context.
Has anyone asked them?
Yeah.
Has anyone asked them to
Denise is
extend
actually
it?
on the board, and we have talked about whether the board would want to do that, and I think they would have to examine that for them.
But has anyone put in the request to extend their pension
No.
debt? Okay, so let me just finish off with just a couple statements here. I've got all the questions. I just wanted to get a lot of this on the record anyways. The City of Phoenix, or actually the police and fire pension system, is literally the most destable of all of them. All this does is it destabilizes it. It just destabilizes it even more. I think that this move today, and I know I'm in the minority on this, is the most fiscally irresponsible move I've ever seen at the City of Phoenix. Fiscally irresponsible. I mean, when civilians are out here telling that they wouldn't even do this to their own pension plan, but they'd be willing to do this to police and fire, that tells me a lot on its own. The other part of it deals with the fact that if you look at this, and this is to those police officers that are in the room here today, you do not want this to happen to you. You have an opportunity of a lifetime right now to keep it the way it is. What it does today, you actually have surety. You have assurances that these pensions are going to be paid off. If you look at a lot of these other major cities that people talk about around the country, they've destabilized their pensions over time. And the reason that they've done that is they've continually added more and more debt. So if the City of Phoenix has the highest revenues ever. You see, let's say you have a neighbor next door to you that cannot handle their finances. They can't handle it. They're not doing well. Would you recommend to them to increase their debt, to go out there and take another credit card? You wouldn't do that. So why the police and fire pensions, which are the hardest, the most difficult today, why do it to them when people aren't even willing to do it to themselves? The other part of this you need to think about too, and Brian, I just got to mention this too. I know you talked about battleships. Battleships, and in particular even aircraft carriers, have to turn quickly. Otherwise they sink. A battleship, I think, turns in less than 25 minutes, a complete 180. An aircraft carrier, I can't remember, but it's fast as well. So if you're not turning, if you're not being able to adapt, if you're not willing able to reform, in this case here, you're going to sink. If you look at what's happening around the country, or let's even look around the state of Arizona, the city of Chandler has made a commitment to pay down their pension debt. The trends across the country right now are to pay down the pension debt, not expand them and not to add on to them. Those are the trends. The reason why is because pensions are becoming a bigger and bigger problem. And then you're going to ask yourself, for those of you that are going to retire, you're going to all ask yourself this question: how did we get here? It will have started here today because of this. And you're going to wonder why the pension debt for police and fire in particular, you're going to ask yourself this question: well, why us? Second question is going to be, how did it happen? And those of you that are a little older, this may not impact you, but those people those police officers in particular that are mid-range in there, you're going to have difficulty. And if you think that the City of Phoenix is going to pay down any significant amount of monies after all the government waste I've seen here, you're crazy. It ain't going to happen. It ain't going to happen. Every one of you sat in these rooms and you've seen how much money goes out the door here. You've seen it. And do you really think that this is financially in your best interest? It is not. On the taxpayer side of it, it's definitely not in the financial benefit of the taxpayers. And when I talk to people, literally neighbor to neighbor on this, and I explain to them that the City of Phoenix is looking at expanding their debt, every one of them says, are you guys crazy to do that? It's insane to do this. It is insane. You have an opportunity of a lifetime to fix it, to make it work, but instead, because of short-term needs, you're willing to sacrifice the long-term fiscal stability of the city. And I'm obviously not in favor of this. Thank you, Mayor.
I think, Councilman, other comments?
Mayor,
Councilman Valenzuela? City Manager.
I just want to provide some further information.
Thank you.
So Phoenix is not the most unstable pension in the statewide system. In the chart, if you look in there, there are several other cities and fire districts and even state agencies that have a lower funded percentage than the City of Phoenix. And there are other cities who are this week taking action to move to 30 years, including Mesa. I would not ever recommend anything to the council, nor would Jeff or Denise, that we believe to be fiscally irresponsible. In fact, what we believe is this is actually fiscally responsible. And I have a family member who has variable income. That family member asked about whether to have a 30-year mortgage or a 15-year mortgage. The advice that family member got from the realtor was, take the 30 and pay it like it's a 15. And when your income varies or your expenses vary, you're assured that you're going to keep your house. So this is not fiscally irresponsible. To the issue of civilians not doing this to their own pension, one of the issues with this is that the reforms that this council passed and that the voters passed for COPERS have had time to take effect. And so the pressure on COPERS is much reduced from the pressure on PSPRS. It is possible that the board may want to extend the amortization period to 30, but I don't know. They have to review that in their fiduciary capacity, and there's lots of questions to go into that. Chandler's in a much different situation than us because of the age of their workforce, the length of time that they've had police and fire departments, and so Chandler's situation is a very different one from ours in their ability to pay their obligation differently. Every city has a different set of circumstances. Prescott is different from Phoenix, is different from Mesa, is different from Chandler, is different from Paradise Valley. And that's why, to Mr. Tobin's point, the legislature gave the option to each city to do. But in terms of the civilian system, that's an evaluation that the civilians have to make in that system, and it really doesn't have any bearing on whether we recommend 30 or 20 or 25 here, because COPERS and PSPRS are in different situations. So I just wanted to make those comments clear for the record.
Thank you, Mr. City Manager. Councilman Valenzuela.
Thanks, Mayor, and thank you, Ed, Jeff, and your entire team, Denise. You know, I was listening to you, Councilman DeCiccio, for the few minutes that you spoke, and the one point that you left out is the point that you always leave out, which is the solution. At the end of the day, how do you fix it? Many times, and I can't wait to hear it, but I'm going to predict what it is. Many times when you finally do come up with a solution, it has to do with phantom tax or phantom budget cuts and just nickel and diming from funds going to programs that you don't like. And the fact of the matter is, this is a diverse council representing a diverse city, and people value libraries. People value, even in your neighborhood, I'm sure, they value libraries. They value senior centers. They value having a sufficient number of police officers and firefighters in their community. They value after-school programs. They value street maintenance. They continue to value clean water, drinkable water going to their faucets. They value trash collection, and the list goes on and on and on. So that's a fact. The truth of the matter is, I don't see a better plan than the hybrid plan, given the circumstances that we are at. I'd like to know, if we don't go with either of these plans, and if we go with this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity that Councilman DeCiccio talks about, what does that mean to the city budget? What does that do to those services that we talked about, that I just mentioned? You know, for those who rely on senior centers, what should we get ready to tell those families? After-school programs, those who take their children to swimming pools this summer and next summer, and so, we're going to pass a budget, I believe, real soon, which I'm really appreciative and supportive of, that calls for 259 police officers and about 40 firefighters. We continue to be in this position where we need to add more police officers. You yourself, you've sent out many emails asking for more cops. How do we afford that, Councilman, if we don't go with one of these options? And yeah, so let's, I'm sure you're going to take the floor, and I want you to, because I'd like to know what the plan is, frankly. A legal plan that doesn't require breaking contracts and hurting the city's bond rating. That's what I'm interested to hear. Because right now, the best plan on the table is the hybrid plan, option D, in order to move the city forward. And you mentioned the COPERS system. You mentioned the COPERS system, which I was on this council for, and I'm proud to have helped lead that effort, along with Councilwoman Williams, to help lead that effort, and it succeeded, and the COPERS system is in a better position today because of it. Councilman DeCiccio, you voted no on that. You voted no against that plan. So,
I don't think that's true.
did you not vote no?
No.
You were supportive of those changes at the Cobra system, huh?
Yeah, they were marginal at best, but, you know, they
Okay.
moved it in the right direction.
Okay, well, I'll have to go back and check the tape on
For
that.
the record.
Sure, I will do that too. So every time there is an opportunity to help move the city forward, you tend to be on the other side of things. But you always have the greatest email, and you tell half the story. You know, I wouldn't be surprised if that was the information you get from neighbors when you tell them that the city of Phoenix is planning to do these things. You should probably let them know why we're in this position and what the other, you know, what the ramifications may be if we don't go that way. But it's not like you only say transparency, you only use those keywords, you're not about it though. I get it. But, you know, at the end of the day, it's about solving a problem, being a problem solver, not necessarily a problem, and actually moving the city forward. And it's not the ideal situation that we're in, but given the circumstances and all of the information, not half of the information, I would have to say D is the best option here.
All right, thank you very much, Councilman Valenzuela.
Mayor?
Any other comments or by members of this council? Councilman DeCiccio, please.
I love it when Councilman Valenzuela challenges me on these things. I've written a paper on it. I don't know if you've had a chance to read it, but anybody well, you should read it because it talks about revenue-based policies versus outcomes-based policies and how revenue-based policies don't work. But that's another issue. But anybody who wants a copy of it, 602-262-7491. I'll cover some of the solutions that are in there. But let's talk a little bit about transparency and things like that. When you look at this, the City of Phoenix has a $1.2 billion general fund budget. And we had, how many meetings did we have on this thing? I don't know how many meetings, but it was multiple meetings, every district, everything else. Now the City of Phoenix wants to literally rack up another $2.3 billion, almost double the general fund, with barely one meeting. That's it. And then you're going to vote on this on June 21. When you talk about solutions, you've got to be willing to actually go out there and create the solutions on this. And I've been talking about this for a while now, but can't seem to get the support of others because it requires tough decisions to make that. So when you look at a strategic plan, this is what a strategic plan does. And since we've got police officers and we're talking about your pensions, we look at when you do a strategic plan, and it's as simple as this. And like I said before, a simple UPS store has a plan like this, where the City of Phoenix does not have a plan like this. So you look at every function of government, like a police officer, I would say that's a strategic function, and then you have to make a decision. If it's a yes, it's a strategic function. If it's not, you don't do it. If it's a strategic function, police and fire, and Danny, you're a firefighter, you know that. I would consider you to be a strategic function. So then you have to make a decision all the way down the line. The individuals that service the cars, do they have to be individuals that are paid by the City of Phoenix, or can they be someone on contract? So let me give you some numbers here. And this is all in my paper, and I'm going to show you where you have a problem and what the solution to this is. And I appreciate you engaging me on this because I enjoy talking about this. The City of Phoenix, I did a study of those 50 retirees, 50 retirees. They've already retired. They're the top 50 people. By the time that they're 78 years old, they will walk away with over $173 million. This is in my paper, all documented. Actuaries helped me put it together. 50 people. They're the top, granted, but we have 13,000 employees at the City of Phoenix, 13,000. The question is, are all those strategic functions that we need to have here? The other part of it is if you look at it, of the 13,000, our average cost per employee, that's all in, is $110,000 per person or more per person. So the people that are making the oil change, we've got 200 people doing that, working in the auto body shop, when you could literally do this with a Jiffy Lube at other locations. Would it be a lot less expensive for us to go to a Jiffy Lube and get an oil change there, or do we have to drive someone all the way to the shop to do that? That's what a strategic plan does. It looks at your overall system and whether or not it works or it doesn't work, whether or not you should be doing it or not doing that. There's still plenty of time to do that, Councilman Valenzuela. But I want you to compare this also with the bad decisions that the City of Phoenix has made. So this falls in line And it's worse than this. The Phoenix Sheraton, which you and I have had a debate on this, you think it's a great idea. I think it's a horrible idea
Put
back
words
then
in my
even.
mouth, Sal.
Well,
You're going to do that in your email already. You don't have to do it while we're actually
why
sitting in
not?
the same room.
I'd like to do it to you
What-
when you're here.
But
let me
putting
finish.
words in my mouth.
No, I'm not putting words. You talked about all these other programs being so good. The Phoenix Sheraton and the Downtown Hyatt just sold for $107 million with 693 rooms. 693 rooms. The city of Phoenix built a Sheraton at $350 million, still has a debt of $305 million, and it's probably worth about $175 million today, maybe $175 million, if you look at the room rates. So what ended up happening there, this just falls in line in one bad decision after another. It's a fiscal. If you're talking about where to save money, the city of Phoenix spends millions of dollars on lobbying and public relations and membership dues, close to $5 million a year. Is this something that's critical? I don't think so. I think it's something we can do without, that it can go in other places. The city of Phoenix spent millions of dollars giving away these things called GIPLETs, millions of dollars every single year. I voted against every one of those things. They're property tax abatements on
I don't
property
remember
owners
that.
in the downtown area, but none of them went into the poor area. They all went into the wealthy areas with wealthy properties. So if you look at that, that is where the waste is. The city of Phoenix is building affordable housing apartments, okay? The most expensive private sector apartment complex ever sold in the city of Phoenix at the time was $277,000 a unit on 26th Street in Camelback, one of the nicest areas, if not the nicest area of the city, just because it happens to be in my district. But the city of Phoenix is building affordable housing apartments at $281,000 a unit on 24th and Van Buren, on land we already own. None of this is logical because it isn't. If it doesn't intuitively make sense, like this thing here of paying down your debt, if it's not intuitive, don't do it. But thank you for asking,
All
Councilman.
right, thank you very much. Councilman,
Mayor,
did you?
Mayor, he actually brought my name up, so I think.
Let me ask a quick question. So the comprehensive list of strategic functions is available at the phone number. What's the phone number again? You said people wanted to get your list.
Yeah, well, it's not it's my paper on what's really happening in government.
It is not
behind
your
closed doors.
comprehensive list of the functions you support the city?
Mayor? No, I didn't say that. I said it's
Well,
a
make sure.
paper talking about solutions.
Okay,
It
so what's the
outlines
phone number
problems.
people can get the report?
Well, thank you, Mayor. That's nice. 602-262-7491. Call my office. We will send it to you. Make sure you share it. We've already sent out over 1,000.
If they wanted to pull it down from the website, what's the website?
I can't remember right now, Mayor. But go to my Facebook, Councilman Sal DeCiccio. It's on there. Facebook, Councilman Sal DeCiccio.
It's on the Facebook site and the phone number.
602-262-7491.
And we get off the website at a future meeting. Councilman Valenzuela, please.
Thanks. First of all, Councilman DeCiccio, again, not being very transparent, you have supported a GIPLET in the past. Well, didn't you support the Renaissance GIPLET?
No.
You didn't. There was not one GIPLET. Are you telling me on record you never supported a GIPLET?
I don't believe I did, but tell me which one you think I did.
No,
well, you've got
you would know. I mean, you
no,
voted.
hey, look, I go back a long ways. I don't know. Just tell
You
me if I
certainly
did.
do, Councilman. And
I don't
back
remember
to the
doing that.
90s, and so.
Oh, back to the 90s. Okay.
Well, you do, right?
I don't
Okay.
remember if I did, but that's 1990.
Well, Councilman, maybe you should go back and take a look at your own GIPLET votes before you make a statement
20
like you
years?
never supported a GIPLET.
Okay, I don't remember doing that in 1990.
Your words were, I never supported one of those things,
Okay.
and you probably should know what
Let
you
me
support and not support.
back off of it because I'm not sure what I did in 1990. But thank you for bringing that up. I'll look it over.
All right, Councilman Valenzuela.
I'm not done, Mayor.
Please.
Because I want to make myself very clear, and I apologize for stating that you did not support putting the reform on as a ballot initiative, because you did. What I was remembering is that you were in the Ahwatukee newspaper, or Ahwatukee Times, if that's correct.
Ahwatukee
Foothills, urging people to vote no on the initiative. So maybe that's
No,
what I meant.
I don't think that
So-
happened either.
Would you like me to Google it and send you the link? Because I can do that. In fact, while I'm sitting here, I'll do that. Because it doesn't take, in fact, I have it up. Look at this. Vote no on all propositions this month. Councilman Sal DeCiccio, Ahwatukee.com, Ahwatukee Foothills News. You know, here it is.
Well, what were the propositions? Well, I know. Let me read it.
Well, I mean, look, I sat
Kind of
here.
minor stuff, but go ahead.
I sat here and pulled it up, sitting here, listening to you talk for 3 minutes. You might want to do that to yourself before you make these statements.
Well, you just made whatever. Just tell me what it is you want to do. What's your point?
My point is, you continue to talk and still not one solution. Given today's circumstance.
I laid them
no,
all
no,
out.
no, no. In a perfect world, if we had to start all over, this is what we might do. How about today's circumstances? Under the circumstances today,
Yeah.
given the situation we're in today, you tell us, what is your solution to get us out of this?
None of
mess
that. That's
today?
all
right,
bad stuff.
Well, Councilman, we're
Horrible,
waiting on
horrible
a
stuff.
solution from you. What would you do today
to
to
you.
lead this city forward, given those circumstances?
Gave it to you, Councilman.
So would you break
All right.
every contract in order to start this? Or so
No, never
how
said
would you
that.
do this?
Contract's a contract. You can't break those.
Exactly. You can't break those. These are the circumstances that we're under.
No, they're
It's
not.
a time for problem solvers.
No, remember what the city manager said at the last meeting? He was going to bring alternatives to the table of different ways. This is only one
Right.
way, one solution that he was come up with. This is only one. There are multiple ideas out there. I
Council-
even asked at the meeting. I said,
Councilman
"What about
Valenzuela
it?"
supports option D, and we vote on that in a couple weeks. Councilman DeCiccio has some solutions, and you call his office, I guess I'll give you the paper. And I don't mean to drag it on and on, but it seems like that's the, at least for today, I guess that's we're going to have to end it.
It's 155 pages too, folks.
155 pages. And we'll get the website next time, I guess. All right, any other members, comments of members of the council?
Mayor, it's
Councilman
Jim Waring. Can I speak?
Yes, of course.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Just real quick, I would be concerned doing any of these options except really the status quo would concern me because I think certainly short-term spending always seems to trump long-term thinking. I'm very concerned if we free up money in next year's budget, it won't go to pay off pension debt. However well-intentioned we may be now as a group, I think collectively at least, that's probably not what's going to happen. I know there have been some outliers. Jeff alluded to that. Payments have been made that were extra payments. How many and over how many years, I don't know. It felt like he didn't know. But I would be very concerned to give this council discretion to sort of kick the can down the road because that's what's kind of happened in the past. And so I would have those concerns, and I'll just leave it at that. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Thank you for that thorough report. I know this is it's a challenging issue, and appreciate the information. City Manager, your thoughtful recommendation that City of Phoenix do what Governor Brewer did and the state of Arizona did back in 2013 to provide that budget flexibility, and I'm inclined to support that recommendation to give the City of Phoenix that important budget flexibility moving forward. I do want to thank Ken Crane, President of the Phoenix Law Enforcement Association, representing rank and file police officers, as well as Local 469 Phoenix firefighters who have also indicated their support for this, representing firefighters throughout the city of Phoenix and many other communities as well. And with that, our meeting is adjourned.